Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
This is still. Anybody else? Kanuram?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
I can hear you.
I hear you folks. Okay. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukhaṁ karoti vachalam pangum langhaya te girim jatkripatamaham vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Welcome to our third attempt to discuss what I have come to call the way of accepting shelter. It'll probably change shape any number of times as I keep fiddling with this idea. And today, I apologize in advance. There will be a lot of reading. I wanted to take a look at some of the points that Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj makes in his first chapter of Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam. And then I also, well, you'll see there's a kind of a natural segue once we get to the end there. I want to take a look at his introductory song to his book of songs on Sharanagati through the eyes of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's commentary on Sharanagati. He has a little book where he shares some of his insights, and many of them, as we'll see, are from Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam. But I want to get to that, so we'll share screen. This is all a little intimidating to me. It's still very new, and I'm trying something even newer this time. I've put together a slideshow. I hope this works. Using Keynote for Mac. So how do I minimize these things? Oh, I have to get out of the. Huh, okay. Let me get those things out of the way here. So as of this week, I'm calling this these presentations Sharanagati, the path of accepting shelter, exploring the way of seeking shelter at Lord Sri Krishna's lotus feet. So we see Srila Sridhar Maharaj begins the first chapter of his Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam. Well, he has some other things going on, and then he gets to what he calls Vastu Nirnaya, the theme of this work. So he says, Bhagavat Bhaktita Sarva Mityutsurja Vidherapi Kainkaryam Krishna Padai Ka Shayatvam Sharanagatihi. So this is another definition of Sharanagati, being governed by the faith that all success is achieved by serving the Supreme Lord, to abandon servitude even to scriptural injunctions and take exclusive refuge in the lotus feet of Sri Krishna in every time, place, and circumstance is known as Sharanagati, unconditional surrender. So this also corresponds quite well with the definition we have of faith in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kohe, Sudardhanishchoy, Krishna Bhakti Koile Sarva Karma Krita Hoy. That what we call faith means a firm conviction in the proposition that simply by serving Krishna, all other goals that anyone might aspire for will be attained. So we see here how Sharanagati is an expression of this in action. So this is unconditional surrender will be activity governed by the faith that all success is achieved by serving the Lord, and abandoning even scriptural injunctions, taking exclusive refuge in the lotus feet of Sri Krishna in every time, place, and circumstance. And we'll see that particularly when we get to the end of our presentation today. I need to be aware of time. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj continues, and these are presented in his Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam as couplets, Sanskrit couplets. And just to save time and space, I don't include those. But if someone has access to Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam, I think that if you have, those of us who have some appreciation for Sanskrit will take great delight in many of these. He is, as we know, Srila Sridhar Maharaj was a superb devotional poet. So he continues, some consider Sharanagati to be that God consciousness, which is realization of the non-differentiated nature in all beings and objects by seeing the Supreme Lord as the indwelling supersoul of everything. However, such a conception falls within the category of calculative devotion, jnana bhakti. It is not in the line of unadulterated, pure devotion, shuddha bhakti. So this may also remind us of Srila Rupa Goswami's definition of bhakti that we find in the 11th verse of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karma dhinavritam anukulyena krishnana shilanam bhakti uttama. So pure devotional service, shuddha bhakti, uttama bhakti, the highest conception of bhakti, means giving up all other considerations, even jnana, karma, yoga, everything. Jnana, karma, adi means jnana, karma, and everything else. Giving all these things up, or in the language of this particular verse of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's, giving up all calculative devotion. In other words, calculating, trying to understand, trying to figure out how I might benefit from this. Anukulyena krishnanu shilanam. So do that. So instead of making any calculations about what might benefit me, to do everything simply with an attitude of pleasing Krishna. So I really like this, especially in light of Dulal Chandra's presentation last week, as the about how the Sandarbhas, Jiva Goswami Sandarbhas, present Jnana Shunya Bhakti, or brain dead Bhakti. I remember that Guru Nishta had I think that was the name of his blog some years ago, Brain Dead Bhakti. And it was about Jnana Shunya Bhakti. So he says that that we should give up, Srila Sridhar Maharaj suggests here that we should give up all personal calculation about how I might benefit from engaging in bhakti. And he continues, by scriptural reference, the learned know of the eternality of surrender to the Lord. So it's not something conditional, it's not something momentary, but it is the actual, as Srila Sridhar Maharaj puts it in the title of this book, it's the life-giving nectar of the jiva. It's what actually brings us alive, what actually brings us to our real life as eternal servants of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By scriptural reference, the learned know the eternality of surrender to the Lord, since the futility of human life without that surrender is elucidated therein. In this way, the eternal constitution of surrender is established. Because the devotees who have surrendered unto the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord never aspire for anything else whatsoever, the learned affirm that surrender is the attainable goal of all endeavors. Everything is accomplished by surrendering unto the lotus feet of Sri Hari, even for one who was unable to execute the integral practices of devotional service based on hearing and chanting. Oh, and here you see my fault as an editor. I didn't change practices to an American spelling. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj is suggesting here that even those of us who aren't able to execute Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, the other practices of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti very well, we can attain everything simply by engaging in this Shadanga, Sharanagati, these six processes of surrender. Since surrender is achieved by turning to the refuge of the Lord just once, we should earnestly discuss the subject to enable the longing for surrender to be born in us. So what is the point of our discussing Sharanagati? Why has Padmanabha Maharaj kindly drawn me in to this project? Well, because he knows that I have some desire to awaken in myself a longing for surrender, and that I can best do that as someone who generally tends to see himself as a writer. I tend to do that by writing about it, by exploring about it. When I taught writing in colleges and universities, I taught it as an epistemic activity, as a way of figuring things out, a way of gaining deeper understanding of something. And I see that, in some of my friends' writings, I see that, oh, this is something that he or she was curious about. So she decided to write this article in order to explore that. And I have a few projects that are waiting for me to give them some attention for just the same reason. And he continues, furthermore, since the constituent parts of surrender, based on acceptance of the favorable and rejection of the unfavorable, have been referred to by authorities and cited in the scriptures, the great devotees of the Lord teach us the necessity of studying and culturing the art of surrender. One who is severely afflicted by fear of living in the material world, or one who, despite having an aspiration for the Lord's service, is nonetheless bound with adversity, such persons, finding no alternative, surrender to the personality of Godhead. Oh, and I see I have that repeated without having removed those quotation marks. The state of finding no other alternative occurs in two ways: in the event of having no other shelter, or in the event of abandoning one's existing shelter. So that's, I find that a really interesting, excuse me, a really interesting assertion. There are two ways that we come to the conclusion that we don't have any alternative than to take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. One is realizing that we really don't have any shelter, or on having given up the shelter, those things of which we have taken shelter, which we see, we hear from our acharyas, all turn out to be fallible soldiers. So, in other words, voluntarily or involuntarily. In the event of having no other shelter means involuntarily, means, nothing works for me. Taking shelter of my profession or my family, or my national identity or my church, these things somehow or other aren't giving me relief from the forest fire of material existence, or realizing that that shelter is going to fail anyway, and you instead turn to a shelter which is perfectly reliable. Then Srila Sridhar Maharaj continues, one surrenders by thought, word, and deed. Complete surrender in all these aspects promptly affords full success. Otherwise, the fruit attained will be proportionate to the degree of one's surrender. And we see that same idea suggested in the 4th chapter of the Antya-lila of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Lord Chaitanya is talking Sanatana Goswami out of his idea of committing a sort of spiritual suicide by throwing his body under Lord Jagannath's cart during the Rath Yatra festival, because of what he felt was a body that had become completely repugnant and just a complete impediment. And Lord Chaitanya came to assure him that this isn't the case. You shouldn't be thinking like this. This is not a material body. This is not even your body. So he says, at the time of initiation, as the sadhaka engages in atma samarpana, in self-surrender, then Krishna accepts that devotee's body, that sadhaka's body, as being as good as his own. And he refers to it twice in a couple of verses. The practitioner's body as being chidanandamoy, being composed of entirely of spiritual substance. So this is, as we know, this isn't the siddha deha, this is the sadhaka deha. This is the practitioner's body, which becomes spiritualized by engaging in atma samarpana, which, as we'll see, is one of the aspects of Sharanagati. So proportionate to the degree of our surrender, we will be able to realize, actually, our success in our spiritual endeavors. A similar example is given in the 11th canto, early in the 11th canto, when King Nimi is receiving instructions from the Navayogendras, these 9 sages. And one of them describes, this is always kind of my barometer verse. How do I know I'm making progress? How do I know I'm actually engaged in bhakti? Bhakti pareshano bhavo viraktiranyatra cha tri eka kalaha. 3 things happen simultaneously and progressively as we engage in bhakti: a sense of devotion, a direct experience of the Lord, and detachment from everything else. In a way similar to when we eat a meal, we attain 3 things simultaneously and progressively: tushti, pushti, kshudapaya, pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger. So these things are all analogous with each other. And in his commentary on this verse, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says this begins with the first morsel, the tushti, the pleasure in eating, the relief from hunger. No, I mean, so the pleasure, the nourishment, and the relief from hunger, they all begin with the first bite, and they grow as we continue to eat. So in the same way, as we continue to surrender, we realize more and more our attainment of the goal. And then what is that goal? Srila Sridhar Maharaj says, the unprecedented gracious reward of surrender is that being most affectionate toward his surrendered souls, the Supreme Lord totally dispels their unhappiness, graciously filling their hearts with his sweet, absolute presence. Certainly something to think about. To the extent that we have a sense of ourself, then that is certainly something to aspire for. Having our hearts filled with the Lord's presence. And then he says, without unconditional surrender, one cannot conceive of oneself as belonging to him. And this is why the learned sing par excellence the glories of surrender's ability to yield her unprecedented gracious fruit. So this is a very important thing. I like this idea of without surrender, not being able to conceive of ourselves as belonging to Krishna, because Srila Prabhupada often described Krishna consciousness as the sense that I am Krishna's and Krishna is mine. Now, this is certainly easier to conceive of at in higher stages of bhakti, but this is what we want. We want this change of heart. So, since I'm being bothered by Siri again, I'm going to see if I can dismiss her. Siri, go away. Didn't work. She's trying to get me to calm down. Goodbye, Siri. So he says, because of this goal of belonging to Krishna, having our hearts filled with Krishna's presence, he says, therefore, the learned sing par excellence the glories of surrender's ability to yield her unprecedented gracious fruit. So that just seemed to me like a perfect segue to one of the excellent songs about the fruit of Sharanagati, one of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs. Okay, okay, she went away on her own. That's magic. And that is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's introduction to his Sharanagati. And I haven't yet found an appropriate kirtan in which Agnidev Prabhu sings this song to the tune, which has become very familiar to those of us in our Sangha. So I'm just going to read through these verses along with Srila Sridhar Maharaj's commentary on them from his, oh gosh, I can't remember what he calls his commentary on the Sharanagati. The gentle, it's something like the gentle moonlight commentary or something. It's a really typically wonderful title for his commentary. So we know this song. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jive Daya Kori Swapar Shadasriya Dhama Saha Avatari. Being merciful to the souls, being merciful to all jivas, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu descends with his associates and abode. And so Srila Sridhar Maharaj points out in his commentary on this first verse that Sri Krishna Chaitanya is the name by which Lord Chaitanya was addressed after his. That's his sannyas name, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And we'll see why. Atyanta durlabha prema kuribari dan shikaya sharanagati bhaktera pran. To distribute the most rare form of prema, he teaches Sharanagati, which is the life of the devotees. And he comments on these first two verses. He says, in Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Sri Gaursundar's sannyas ceremony is described. Jata Jagater Tumi Krishna Bolaila, Koraila Chaitanya Kirtana Prakashila, Ete Keto Maranama, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Sarvalokatoma Hoite, Jate Hoiladhanya. Keshava Bharati said on initiating Lord Chaitanya as a sannyasi, you have induced the whole world to chant Krishna's name and brought everyone to life, Chaitanya, by inaugurating the Sankirtan movement. Therefore, your name will be Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Because of you, everyone in the whole universe has become fortunate. Well, there's a failure of my formatting. And then we see in this way, Lord Chaitanya accepted sannyas and revealed his name, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. So he's explaining why Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu here. And then Srila Sridhar Maharaj continues, Atyanta durlabha prema, the most rare form of prema. This refers to the fifth ultimate end of human life, Sri Krishna prema. So we know this, that there are four goals for human beings: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Virtue or piety, religion, duty, however you want to characterize dharma. Dharma, artha, material progress; kama, pleasure gained through making material progress; and moksha, release from all this once we realize its utter futility. But then we see at the end of the Bhagavad-Gita, as we've seen in the previous weeks, Krishna makes a demand at the end of his conversation with Arjuna. He says, Manmanabhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskar. He says, just just love me. Don't worry about the other stuff. And then he says, even more pointedly, sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam braja aham twang sarva papepyo moksha shami ma suchaha. He says, forget all the other stuff. We've discussed this, what you should do from so many angles of vision. So now let's set all those aside and you just take shelter of me. Take mamekam sharanam. Take exclusive shelter of me. And even if there's some fault in doing so, some fault incurred in doing so, some sins incurred in doing so, mokshyashyami masucha, I will personally take care of it. I've got you covered. I've got your back. So masucha, don't worry. Don't, he's like telling Arjuna, it'll be fine. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. Let's just do this. So this is so Krishna tells us, that at the end of the Bhagavad-Gita, that we have to forget every other consideration, every other goal, give up all this sort of calculative, even things, something that appears to be bhakti, as long as there's this calculation. How can I make myself better? Forget it. Just do what needs to be done under my direction. Let me work through you. And I'll take care of the goals. I'll take care of the consequences, positive and negative. And then we know also that the Bhagavatam opens with the next the next logical step, as Guru Maharaj likes to say, the Bhagavatam is the theological sequel to the Bhagavad-Gita. So it opens by telling us what the Bhagavatam's about and who is the fit audience. So Dharma Prodchita Kaitavotra Paramo Nirmatsana Saranam Satam. For those whose hearts are completely pure, because they've given up all the business of exploitation and renunciation. We saw this last week, right? We're talking about bhakti, which has nothing to do with either exploitation or renunciation. So the Bhagavatam opens by saying, for those whose hearts are pure because they have already given up all this cheating religion. Dharma Kaitava. And what about the Dharma Kaitava? Praujita, completely rejected. Just as Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita, Parityajya, completely reject. So for those who have already completely rejected these things, all these other goals, and instead have embraced the Panchama Purushartha, the Parama Purushartha, the fifth and ultimate, the real goal of human life, which is Prem Prayojana, then now we've got something to talk about. That's who this book is for. And this is what we're going to address. So here we have this Panchama Purushartha, this fifth goal of human life. And he says, the rarity of Sri Krishna Prema has been noted by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And this is a verse from Lord Shiva. Liberation is easily attained by cultivating knowledge of Brahma, Jnana. Heavenly enjoyment, bhukti, is easily attained by performing various types of pious activities, karma, such as sacrifices. However, even by following thousands of different spiritual practices, Hari Bhakti is extremely difficult to attain, as it requires servitude to the Lord's pure devotees, a proper conception of the Lord's divine nature, firmly fixed loving attachment for the Lord devoid of any impurities, and the Lord's merciful acceptance of the practitioner. And then Srila Sridhar Maharaj gets right to the point. In Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, this most rare form of prema, which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to distribute, is described as follows. Anarpita charim chidat karunaya avatirna kalau samarpayita munatojvala rasam svabhakti shriyam. Haripurata sundara duty kadam, Haripurata sundara duty kadamba sandipita sada hridaya kandare spurato va sachinandana. May that radiant golden Lord, Sri Sachinandana, always be manifest in the core of your heart. He has mercifully descended in the age of Kali to give the wealth of devotion to himself, supremely exalted Madhura Rasa, which had never been given before, or as Guru Maharaj likes to say, at least not for a very long time. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj is showing us how this first verse points right to this fourth verse of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is the whole point of Lord Chaitanya's appearance. He had two goals in mind. One was to teach the Yuga Dharma and Raganuga Bhakti, and the other was to taste the sweetest Krishna Bhakti himself. So he had to take the position of the best devotee, Radharani. So then he says, continues discussing the different terms in these verses. Sharanagati, surrender. This means to take shelter of the Lord in all respects. Sharanagati is defined in essence in Sri Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam, and here he is citing himself. So wonderful. And that is having faith that everything is attained by serving the Supreme Lord, abandoning subservience even to scriptural injunctions, and taking shelter of Krishna's feet exclusively is known as Sharanagati. And then the next two verses, which presents the six angas of Sharanagati. Dainya Atma Nivedana Goptratve Varanavasya Krishna Vivasva Vishvasa Palan. Bhakti Anukula Matra Karyera Svikar Bhakti Pratikula Bhava Varjanangikar. Humility, self-submission, embracing the Lord's guardianship, maintaining the faith that Krishna will certainly protect me, engaging only in activities which are favorable to devotion, and rejecting everything which is unfavorable to devotion. And then he wants to discuss some of these in his commentary. Dainya, humility. This is also known as karpanya, experience of one's lamentable condition. Dainya has been defined in Sri Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam. Oh, Lord, please protect me, praying thus in a mood of distress, while remembering in all respects the greatness of the mercy of the Supreme Lord, the unparalleled ocean of compassion, and remembering in particular one's own lamentable lowliness. This condition of the devotees is described by the learned as karpanya. In other words, seeing ourselves in relation to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how far away we are from actually being his devotee. He is so wonderful, and we're so not. And then he discusses Atma Nivedana again by citing his Prapanna Jivanamritam. Atma Nivedana, self-submission. This is also known as Atmotsarga, self-dedication, as has been defined in Sri Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam. Atma Nivedana is known as the condition of having offered oneself to Krishna solely to satisfy him, while being devoid of possessiveness and false egotism. So this takes us back to the discussion of the word namaha, which we found in that unsigned foreword to the book, where the word namaha, it indicates a complete abandonment of our own self-interest. Namaha. This is nothing. This is not about me. This is all about you. Again, jnana shunya bhakti. This is completely non-calculative, and a completely non-calculative approach to the Supreme Lord. And then Goptvitvevaran, embracing the Lord's guardianship. This is also referred to as accepting the Lord as one's maintainer, and has been defined in Sri Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam. Hey Krishna Pahimam Nata Kripayat Magatam Kuru Ityevam Prartanam Krishnam Praptum Swami Sarupata Goptrate Varanam Gyeyam Bhaktir Hridayataram Param Prapatye Ekarta Katvena Tad Agni Dvena Tatsmritam. Oh Krishna, please protect me. Kindly accept me as your own. This prayer to attain Krishna as one's master is supremely pleasing to the hearts of the devotees and is known as Goptvatve Varanam, embracing the Lord's guardianship. Goptvatve Varanam expresses the very ideal of surrender and is thus considered to be its complete embodiment or angi. So this is the Swarupa Lakshanam of Sharanagati. This is the heart, the core of Sharanagati, accepting Krishna as our exclusive maintainer. And he says the other 5 aspects of surrender are considered limbs or angas. So all the others are aspects of this accepting Krishna as our exclusive maintainer, embracing his guardianship exclusively, like an animal, like a domestic animal who depends completely on on, on its folks for its maintenance and care and everything. And then he continues, Avashya Rukshebe Krishna. Krishna will certainly protect me. Avashya Rukshebe Krishna. This is a vishvasa. This is a conviction. And conviction doesn't, when we talk about Shraddha, we're not talking about a belief, just, mere belief. We're talking about a conviction based on some experience. So the conviction that Krishna will protect me means that we've reflected on our experience in this life, and we've seen that Krishna has always protected us. And he certainly has protected, maybe not my body, maybe not even my mind sometimes. Maybe sometimes I go a little off the rails, but what he has protected is my bhakti. And that's something that is not subject, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita, to any kind of diminution. It's always going to be there. And I could go back to my verse in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto of the Bhagavatam, but I won't, out of respect for your time and the clock in general. So this refers to faith that Sri Krishna will assuredly grant his protection and has been defined in Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam. Certainly, Krishna will protect me because he is the true friend of the devotees. He will definitely bless me with all good fortune. Herein, such faith is sustained. And then we're still talking about these 6 angas. Srila Sridhar Maharaj says, Anukula, favorable. This refers to anything helpful for attaining Krishna and has been defined in Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam. Resolute conviction to do everything that is favorable to the service of Krishna, to the service of his devotees, and to surrender is called anukulyasya sankalpa, acceptance of the favorable, and pratikula, unfavorable. This refers to anything that is an obstacle to attaining Krishna and has been defined in Sri Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam. Resolute conviction to abandon everything that is opposed to the service of the Lord, to the service of his devotees, and to surrender is called pratikulya varjanam, rejection of the unfavorable. And then he says, this is one of my favorite parts of this particular song. Shadanga Sharanagati Hoibe Jahar, Tahar Prarthana Shune Sri Nanda Kumar. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Sri Nanda Kumar, Krishna hears the prayers of those who surrender in this 6-fold way. So sometimes when we're on social media, we'll see someone saying, my child was injured. Please pray for him or her, or my husband is undergoing surgery or whatever, all these, so please pray for them. And every time I see that, I think, oh, this is Krishna telling me, you need to take up this process of surrender, because otherwise, what's the point in my offering some prayer? Except to the extent that as we, there's a movie about C.S. Lewis, I think it is, with starring Anthony Hopkins, called Shadowlands. And this is about Lewis's Dark Night of the Soul, when he married late in his life and his wife ended up contracting bone cancer. And at one point she goes into remission, and one of his colleagues says to him, so I hear joy is in remission. Certainly your prayers, certainly God is answering your prayers. And I don't know if this is something Lewis actually said. I don't know if this is even in the play, because I haven't been able to find a copy of the play to check this out. But it's this wonderful line in the movie where Lewis says, that's not why I pray. I pray because I can't help myself. I pray because it comes out of me, out of every pore of my being, morning, noon, and night. And then he says, And this is one of these things that he says with one of those wonderful Anthony Hopkins far off stares. It doesn't change God, it changes me. So maybe there's some sense in my making prayers as an unsurrendered soul, because it'll eventually change my heart. Otherwise, I'm certainly not going to get Krishna's attention unless I've actually wholeheartedly given myself to these six aspects, these six practices of surrender. And then Srila Sridhar Maharaj again lays out, he then gives us this verse from either the Vaishnava Purana or Vayu Purana or a Vaishnava Tantra. Anukul yasya sankalpa pratikulya vivarjanam rakshashyatiti vishvaso goptratre varanam tata atmani kshepa karpane shadvida sharanagati. And then he says, Prarthana Shune, Sri Nanda Kumar hears their prayers. This means Krishna reciprocates with the surrendered souls in accordance with their prayers. And then he cites that verse from the Ramayana that we find in the 22nd chapter of Madhya Lila in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Sakradeva prapanno yas tavasmiti chayachate abhayam sarvada tasmai dadamye tad vratam mama. This is Lord Ramchandra, and if I remember correctly, he's addressing Vibhishana, who has come to take shelter of him, even though he's from the other party. Lord Ramchandra says, anyone who even once sincerely surrenders to me, declaring, I am yours, and prays for fearlessness, it is my vow that I will always grant that to him. So there are these couple of prayers that are given together in that early part of the 22nd chapter, which lays out the 64 angas of sadhana bhakti. And I've been practicing these prayers. My dear Lord Krishna, although I have forgotten you for so many long years in this material world, now I am surrendering to you. I am your sincere and serious servant. Please engage me in your service. And then I always, for the last 51 years since I came across this in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya in probably the spring of 1970, and I tack this on, my dear Lord, from this day I am yours, which is how Srila Prabhupada puts it. Hoping that one of these days I will be able to say this sincerely, and Krishna will be able to, he'll have something to reciprocate with. And then Bhakti Vinod continues, Rupa Sanatana Pade Dante Turnanakori, Bhakti Vinoda Pade Duhum Pada Dori, Kandia Kandia Bale Amitodham, Shikaye Sharanagati Koraheutam. Bhakti Vinod places a straw between his teeth and falls before Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhu and Srila Sanatan Goswami Prabhu. And clasping their feet, crying incessantly, prays, I am so lowly. Please elevate me by teaching me Sharanagati. And so then he explains, Sri Rupa Sanatan, Sri Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Prabhu, these are the two acharyas who teach Sharanagati. And then Uttama, he wants to elucidate Uttama or elevate it. Please lift me up, bring me to your platform, or at least toward your platform. He says this refers to one who is qualified for the topmost form of prema bhakti. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna says, this is Krishna speaking with Uddhava, of course, in the 11th canto, realizing the qualities and faults of, I love this, of the socio-religious system, Varnashram Dharma, which I have instituted. One who completely abandons it and serves me is the best of all sadhus. So this is quite a strong way for Srila Sridhar Maharaj to end his commentary on this introductory song, this introduction to Sharanagati. And I just, as I was kind of going through these yesterday, I realized this is just how I wanted to do it. That I wanted to open up with that first chapter of Prapanna Jivanamritam, and then his commentary on the introductory Sharanagati song, because they both bring us to the same place. Right where it begins, Jnana Shunya Bhakti, no calculation whatsoever. Instead, simply taking shelter of the Lord with nothing in mind other than his pleasure. So that's what I have for today. And inexplicably, shockingly, I have actually left time for discussion. So let's take advantage of it. I think everyone is able to unmute themselves. And if you don't mind, if you have a comment or question, feel free to turn on your video too. I mean, I've made myself vulnerable by turning on mine, and you all are younger and prettier than I am. So let's see you.
I wanted to thank you so much for that class, Maharaj. It was really good.
It's all Bhakti. What could go wrong?
And your Sharanagati.
Raj, can I ask
Anything
a question?
else? Yes. Oh, please.
Dhanavad Maharaj, thank you very much. I also enjoyed this class very, very much. Thank you for reading so much from Prapanna Jivanamrita. It's a wonderful book. I have a question. Maybe it's a whimsical question, but nevertheless, I also like this example of how when eating, with every morsel, these three things follow as you explained. But if we take that example a little bit further, yes, it is like this. With every morsel, happiness, satisfaction, and so on increases, until we get to a particular point after which any more morsels will just bring us will not be satisfaction anymore. It will be a kind of overload. So is it the same with can the same thing happen with surrender? Can you surrender too much and start feeling bad? Or is that actually, have you done something wrong in that case?
That's a wonderful question. And as you probably are aware, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur addresses that in his commentary on that verse. He makes the analogy really clear by pointing out that, first of all, when I look at that verse, I also look at it in the light of his commentary on the 19th verse in the 5th chapter of the first canto, where Narada Muni tells Vyasadeva that, he's making the point that if we engage in any other practice, pursue any other goal, even if in order to attain the goal, we have to do everything perfectly. And if we make a mistake, then we lose everything and have to start back from square one. And it's not like that with bhakti. We don't have to do it perfectly. And even if we completely blow it, nothing is lost, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita, because just from the very first day of practicing, we become, as the verse points out, rasagraha. We become haunted by rasa, haunted by the taste, as Srila Prabhupada puts it in his purport to that verse, by the taste we get from having served the Lord's lotus feet. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that this begins from the very first day of worshiping the Lord. So from the very first morsel, we get pleasure, we get nourishment, and we get relief from hunger. And he says that the analogy breaks down, as all analogies do at some point. No analogy is perfect. The analogy breaks down because, as you point out, you can't eat continuously. Because instead of pleasure, you end up getting disgust. You end up getting what do you call it? Indigestion. And I was just reading, I gave a class on some couple of verses in the Bhagavatam yesterday, where Vidura is asking Uddhava about all the different Krishna's different friends and family members, and he's asking about Arjuna, who got Gandiva. And so we talked a little bit about how Arjuna got Gandiva, and it was part of a scheme to relieve Agni Dev of his indigestion, because there was this like continuous practice going on for a very, very long time, and just too much ghee constantly. So he needed to build up his own fire again. So, and the only way he could do that was consuming this Khandava forest, and but it was being protected, and he wasn't able to do that. So he needed help. So he called, of course, on Krishna and Arjuna. And Arjuna said, yeah, okay, that's nice, but you know what, I've got all these cool weapons and I'm very talented at them, but I really need a better bow. So he arranged for Arjuna to get the Gandiva bow. So anyway, indigestion. So, which is, just kind of, it's a disgusting, we feel not just no satisfaction, but we feel a little disgusted with ourselves because we're thinking, I just couldn't stop eating those pakoras, and all of a sudden it's bad. But he says you can go on serving unlimitedly. And as we serve step by step, then the pleasure, the bhakti, the direct experience of the Lord, and the detachment from everything else, they simply increase unlimitedly. And if we engage in Sharanagati systematically under the guidance of experienced devotees, then we shouldn't encounter that kind of disgust. Sometimes we might tend to get, as we say in English, a little out over our skis, and try to, and we forget the injunction given by one of those Navyogendras to King Nimi, Sve Svetikariya Nishta Saguna Parikirtita. It's a good quality to understand your actual qualification and behave accordingly. Understand where you actually are, and accept things that are appropriate for your stage of spiritual progress and for your situation in the world as well. Sharanagati is going to look different in a sannyasi than it will in a young householder. So, if we practice adopting these 6 angas of Sharanagati systematically, progressively, step at a time, then even the Bhagavatam says, even if we're running with our eyes closed, still there's not a chance of our falling down. So that's the difference that Vishwanath Chakravarti points out between bhakti and eating a meal. And I think it extends as well to Sharanagati. That help?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Maharaj.
Such a wonderful question. Anyone else? Krishna Chaitanya is always good for a question or comment.
I think I recall hearing before someone quote Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur saying something about a person in a fevered condition cannot eat a normal meal, and therefore they would need to be careful in, I'm hoping that someone else has heard that or can tie this in. I've heard one quote it before, but I don't know where it is. And I thought he was talking about someone who maybe didn't have the stomach to digest, even though we know that Krishna Bhakti, you can keep on eating it. Has anyone? I apologize if I'm making something up.
If someone does know where that is, I would be very grateful if they were to send that commentary to me. Someone is suggesting Madhurya Kadambini. So that's a possibility. I think Madhurya Kadambini might be a good place to look. And that, that's in keeping, of course, with that one verse. Actually, it's two verses, isn't it? One in the 20th, toward the end of the 20th chapter, and then the second verse of the 21st chapter of the 11th canto. But Krishna says, Sve Svedhikari Nishta Saguna Parikirtita. It's a good quality to be able to be introspective enough to understand where we really are and behave accordingly. And so there are two things that we're cautioned against. One is trying to do something for which we're not qualified. And the other is being slack in our practice and not really striving for those things for which we have some qualification. So it's always going to be a little stretch. We're always trying to, to get to that next step. And we shouldn't just think, well, it's, wow, it's a little steep there. Just like I have my my opening slide. Oh, I don't have the screen share on now, but I have my opening slide with this path through the forest, and it's a tough path, especially at least at first. It's a little narrow. It can be windy, and it can be steep, and there'll be rocks and branches and things like that that stick out and are likely to trip us up if we're not watching carefully where we're going. So we need to always be aware of where we are. So I like that. I like that idea, and I think it works right along with this. And if someone is able to find that before I do, I'd be really grateful if they sent it to me, even if it's by Facebook message, my least favorite way of communicating, and everyone else's most favorite, apparently. Thank you. Anything else?
I have another comment I wanted to make, and maybe a question. You had mentioned something earlier in the early part of your talk, and you had said Guru Maharaj also says this, and I've heard him say it, but I forgot what it was. But Mitra had a class this morning, and one of the devotees was saying, well, how can you think that we're getting mercy? We're really working hard here. We are endeavoring. We're giving all that we can, and I would think it's an assistance. We're getting assisted by Krishna. And I just kind of mentioned how, guess what? Bhakti does us. The holy name is the one that it's doing us. So do you remember? I mean, I know you mentioned something and it made me think of that. So I was thinking that was really good what you said. And it was something that Guru Maharaj also says too. And I kind of forgot what it was, but I mean, it was really good.
Oh, I'd have to go back and listen again, which is always a painful thing. But sometimes,
yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember.
I think it's the only time that you mentioned Guru Maharaj says this also, so that would help you in finding it. I could listen to it too.
I think I did twice.
Oh.
Maybe 3 times, but at least twice. I'm getting weird feedback from your speaker.
Okay. I think it's the, yeah, okay, sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Oh, no, I can hear you fine.
Okay.
Oh, see, now I can hear myself, but it doesn't sound like I'm a huge growling monster.
Okay.
Anything else before we close? Goran Orion, nothing? Oh, here's a note. Does it follow that a person who commits nam aparad becomes averse to the Lord and thus cannot even take shelter of the guru or perform devotional activities? This is true as during, I think he has found the quotation. Is that from Madhurya Kadambini? The Marosh? Everyone should be able to see that in the chat. As during a serious fever, losing all taste for food, a person finds it impossible to eat. So a person who commits, so this is in the section about anartha nivriti. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. So he says, so a person who commits a serious offense loses the scope for hearing, chanting, and performing devotional activities. So, I was giving a class or reading something recently where the point was being made that, it was in the evening discussing Nectar of Devotion and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. When we're discussing the offenses against the holy name, and Srila Jiva Goswami points out that the holy name is such a powerful deliverer that even if we commit offenses in our practice, the holy name still has that power. But then he says, but what do you do if you commit offenses against the holy name? And then he tells us the 10 offenses against the chanting. So we need to be always cautious. We need to understand what are offenses in our practice, and what are the offenses against the holy name. Here at the temple in Honolulu, just after we have Mangalarti, then we have Tulsi Puja, and then they used to recite the 10 offenses against the holy name, and I suggested something about Harinam Chintamani. So now they have me read a little bit of Harinam Chintamani before we get back to chanting japa after Mangalarti and Tulsi Puja. And so that's a really nice way for us to remember. Sometimes just reciting the 10 offenses, as I've seen done in different temples, it's very rote, mechanical, and the devotees sometimes can't even tell you what they just said. But when we discuss them, when we discuss it like this, then like reading Harinam Chintamani, hearing Haridas Thakur's instructions to the Lord about avoiding offenses against the holy name. Then, so this is a really important point, and I'm very, very grateful for Krishna Chaitanya and Madosh for bringing this to my attention. This is great. Thank you so much. Is there anything else? I'm always worried about my tendency to run way too long. And I know that you all have busy lives. I'm a kind of I hope, Bhagavat Dharma bum. But I know that you all have so many things going on in your lives. So Okay, I will gratefully take my leave and have all these little step things I have to do. I have to remember how to undo. I think I stopped streaming first. I don't remember now. And then stop the recording. Okay, thank you all so much. Hare Krishna. We'll see you here again next week. Oh, Madan Mohan. Hare Krishna.